Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the June board meeting for Ignite CDA. If you'd all stand and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's time for public comment. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll make that motion to approve the consent calendar, the approval of the board meeting minutes for May 15th, 2024, approval of the special call boarding minutes for June 12th, 2024, approval of payables as submitted, and approval of district monthly financial statements.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, that motion carries. Tony, it's time for the Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to invite Phil Boyd up here to continue the conversation on Atlas Project monument entry signage that we tabled at the last board meeting.
Okay, thank you, Tony. No,
Welcome, Phil.
thank you. Monument sign locations, to refresh the board's memory, were in these three locations. The board asked us to go out and poll the developers to see what their responses were to the idea of either removing the signs altogether or changing the signs. And so we did that. Tony put that information in your packet, so you guys have seen the responses from the developers. And I was a little bit surprised. Generally, it was, the neighborhood is kind of established. I think it's what Commissioner Meyer had pointed out. It's kind of established. We don't necessarily need a big sign. But then some of them were, gosh, it would be nice to have some identification. So, and with the memo we sent out requesting their input, we put this exhibit in intentionally to give them an estimate of the costs, and then also the renderings that they, where they could possibly go. So I think that's the point that we're at. You guys have seen the feedback, and I think it's now in your hands to provide some direction.
Who wants to start it off?
As a point of clarification, what was the amount spent in the original budget, I believe predating my board service, on the original sign design?
I think it was about $82,000 was the, Bernardo Wills designed the signs, and to develop the site plans, the city permitting, put the construction documents together. So all of that was $82,000. So that's the amount you have invested so far.
Got it. And any speculation on what a moderate redesign, given the topics we've discussed so far, would be some subcomponent of that?
I don't have a good feel for it, because it would be Del Hatch doing the redesign on it, and I wouldn't want to speak for him.
Okay.
And I think a little bit of direction from the board on what, is there a combination of the elements of here?
Sure.
Because prior to you being on the board spent a lot of time working through the logo and the colors and whatnot. And so I don't know if some of those sensitivities will come back when we go through, if we go through a redesign.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, I'll talk because no one else is. I would say thank you, Phil, very much for asking the developers their opinion, and I too was surprised at some of the responses. Yes, the takeaway I had and the thought I had coming into this meeting today was to go with a smaller sign at the Atlas, the option 2 sign at Atlas Road, and to do the Suzanne sign, but not do a Heartwood sign. That was my conclusion based on my thoughts, having participated in this conversation all along, and the feedback from the developers. That was kind of my personal mental conclusion on the subject was Atlas Road option number 2 and Suzanne. So I'll just lay that out there for the rest of you to deal with. Or respond to, I guess. I would say respond to, not
I
deal
like
with.
that.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment.
No, I think the reduction is important. I don't think there's as much demand for the signs as there was previously. So I would be okay with the removal of the Heartwood, sticking with the Atlas Road option 2. And would the one on Suzanne remain?
I think it's important to have something at Suzanne, just, that's one thoroughfare.
Main, yeah.
Yeah, one thoroughfare, and the Atlas is kind of the other thoroughfare. Heartwood is, I'm not convinced that's as important of a sign, but I think making notion and mention of the project as it was called, if we're gonna do a sign, I would think we would want both of those.
You would also know you're out of Riverstone and
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
As they're designed now?
Yeah, I don't want to go through, personally, I don't feel a need to redesign the signs.
painful.
I'm sure we could save some money on it, but the money we might save on redesigning the signs, we'd probably spend on the design work, so.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Garcia, just to clarify, you wouldn't envision adding words to the Atlas waterfront to that signage there?
The option 2,
Yeah.
no.
Any way you can make that bigger? No, just kidding. I would agree with that assessment. And we got an email from Mick, who's not here tonight, and he agreed that, or he mentioned that it's not, the large sign is no, signage is not needed, but he thinks that, still thinks that there's a need for a smaller sign. So the same assessment.
And these two signs, Suzanne is taller than this sign here. The reason that this one was taller is there's a path, a sidewalk that goes underneath it. So would you envision that the Atlas one would stay exactly the way it is, a shorter sign, and then Suzanne would be taller? Or do you think we could, because we could push this one, if we were to do two short signs, we could push the Suzanne sign further, I think, into the property here and get it away from the sidewalk. Or we could do two taller signs. I know, so many options.
If you're asking me personally, I would say I would prefer to just do two similar signs of similar size.
Yeah.
And the smaller size seems fine if that's appropriate. I think we've spent enough time dictating what signs look like. That's been a lot of energy and effort on signs. That would be my reaction as you're asking me.
I would say similar, just for consistency and branding. The only question I had is what other signs are near there for differentiating from like the areas or branding of the individual developments? If it makes sense to make them taller because the other ones are smaller, or, and I can't place them and what else is around there in terms of like clutter, but I think it's important to differentiate those from other signage that might be nearby.
I think the only one I can think of is to the west at the River's Edge development, that they have I recall they have a pretty significant sign there.
Yeah.
At the River's Edge development. But moving from, I'll just use this exhibit, from this location all the way through, there are really no other signs that I can think of until you get to the signal even. And then past that, I think it would be the hotel sign.
And I think within Riverstone, it's either on the buildings or on a
Yeah.
gate. So they're not freestanding signs from what I can recall.
Okay.
Riverstone, from our experience, having developed in it, has the entrance off of Northwest Boulevard. But beyond that, there's not other additional wayfinding, to my recollection, of the overall project. So if we took that same example and said, when you leave the major public thoroughfare which serves your development, sign the entrance to it. Don't have the history about the importance of the entrance from Suzanne, but I would actually flip that question on its head to my fellow commissioners to say, if you leave Atlas and go to Riverstone, is there similar identification? Because if there isn't today, I would question the value of spending the $80,000 on the Suzanne location. Because we're trying to declare something we're emotionally attached to perhaps, but if you look at the way those neighborhoods flow, if it's not in both directions, is there a consistency which justifies the cost of what we're doing?
And I might jump in on Commissioner Meyer's point there. Originally, when Del Hatch was laying out the sign, he had proposed a sign on both this side and this side. and they were big, they were like this. And as we were working through preliminary budgets, we ended up scaling them down, eliminating the one on the west side. And if the board was thinking, you know, we do want to put some gravitas at one location, it could be that two smaller signs, one on the west side, one on the east side, can create that sense of arrival in a pretty significant way that's very recognizable. Also add that there may be some, and I know that the naming didn't seem like a big thing, if the naming seemed like it might be important, there might be a cost-effective way to add it to this piece of laser cut steel in a way. I'm not sure, I'm not the artist or the sign designer, but I'm just kind of tossing out design ideas. I know we don't want to go backwards too far, but we also want to get it right.
You think additional language should be added to the Atlas Road?
I just am wondering if some element to identify Atlas Waterfront, and maybe it's letters across the top, you know, that are not an expensive addition, but something
I
that.
could see the value in that.
Yeah, because, hey, I live in the Atlas Waterfront neighborhood. Go down, you'll see the sign, it says Atlas Waterfront, take a right, or go through the roundabout.
I think I could be in favor of that idea. I feel like the logo does stand on its own, but for a new visitor looking for wayfinding, the logo isn't the wayfinding that we're going to look for, because no map is going to have that particular logo saying, here's the entrance to the project you're looking for. So
Right.
I would be in favor of that, and I think I'm leaning towards the idea of, let's put the emphasis on the entrance. If we look at the Riverstone example, there's a nice bookend of the fountains, the water features. It's really a substantial entrance, and then you find your way from within it, and perhaps replicating that standard, I could see the appeal to that, primarily at the main entrance, and perhaps shifting from Suzanne if we want to do both sides, also be fine with one. But I do like Phil's idea of the additional wayfinding language on the sign. I think that's value add to the users.
Okay.
So just so I'm clear on the comments, I didn't quite hear. So the idea is maybe to have Atlas Road option 2, maybe on both sides of the Atlas Roundabout coming in with some language saying Atlas Waterfront?
Yes.
That's what-
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And at this point, what we would do is, we might figure out if we can lean on our partners here and just get some pro bono renderings to
Not a
give the
building
idea
moment.
across, and if there's not a gigantic heavy lift to add that, if it turns into some heavy lift, and I might be oversimplifying what's involved in creating these things, but we might try to be as just absolutely cost-effective as possible. And maybe even work with the sign company, because Lurivier has a sign company that is doing these particular elements. And so we might be able to actually work with them to get them to do some renderings.
Better design.
And we would bring it back, of course, for the board to look at. But with Tony's summary, that's the direction I would head.
So the Heartland entrance is right in, right out only?
Correct.
So there's another entrance off the main road. Is there, just like Atlas Road is? You were saying you wanted to sign the wayfinding at the entrance. I can understand Suzanne is the entrance, is not the entrance off a main road, but Heartland is.
I would argue perhaps in a comparison that the backdoor access to Riverstone via La Crosse would be treated the same way. That it is another way to the neighborhood, but it's not the primary entrance. Maybe that's taking the example too far, but
No, it might be a good
It's the
example,
mirror
because
image.
maybe you don't want them generally coming in and out of that one so much. You know, that's the back door for the people that work in there,
It's
right?
not the place that you want the coffee shop traffic to go to.
Right.
And, however, the park is buried down in the bottom of it, so people are going to find their way. But I think the turning movement, more traffic, most definitely because of the presence of the roundabout. Now, I'm speculating, putting my engineer hat on
Yeah.
here. More traffic is going to come in because of the roundabout, where we're discussing, rather than the Heartland right in, right out, which might be more resident traffic, perhaps, Scott, but.
I like that.
Yep.
I like that.
I'm on board with the two signs at Atlas. I think that's I like the argument and the thought process on that. 100%
And
behind that.
consistent with
Yep.
Riverstone entrance.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
I've crafted a motion that I think I caught. So just say to proceed with option 2 signage on Atlas Road entrance, and I'll fine tune this, with 2 signs, one on each side of the entrance, with Atlas waterfront language added to each sign both of the same height. But I'll fine tune that, make it sound better, but that's the essence.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Can I ask a question of Phil? Are we gonna need an easement?
I'm not, we might need one from DeChase on this side, so we may need to do that. DeChase provided us an easement over here, and it was really complex to locate it there. On this side, it won't be as complicated, because they don't have a building, I don't think, just kind of going in my mind's eye, I don't think it's as complicated, but Danielle brings up a really good point. And we'll vet those things out, but yeah, good point.
Didn't we have to build a retaining wall on the other side?
I don't think so, and again, I'm kind of thinking, and we do have actually have a pathway easement through here, so the property's kind of encumbered already with other easements, so, and Dean Pape from DeChase has been really good to work with.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up is Atlas Project Area 6, DDA Amendment Number 2. I sent you this amendment for your review. And basically, the amendment deals with the extension penalty clause that pertains to agency-approved phasing plan timeframe extensions. Our team worked with the development team for Active West and came to an agreement that agreement has been signed by the developer, and it comes to you for your approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the Area 6 DDA Amendment Number 2.
Good.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? I don't hear any. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then next is another DDA amendment. This is DDA Amendment Number 2 for areas 14 and 15, which is a little more complicated that you probably saw when you read through it, but it also deals with the extension penalty clause that pertains to board-approved phasing plan timeframe extensions. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have on that, but seeking for a motion to approve that DDA amendment.
I'll go ahead and make a motion then to approve areas 14 and 15 DDA Amendment Number 2.
Second?
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then I'd like to invite Phil back up for just a general Atlas project update.
Thank you, Tony. Okay. So general Atlas update, back to the overview. We're going to have a milestone tomorrow because Phase 2B, which is this area here, will get paved out tomorrow, which is a positive thing. Been working forward to that for quite a while. And LaRiviere actually ended up a little bit earlier in their schedule. They had thought it might be the first part of July, and now we are June 20th, so that's a positive thing. So that'll get paved out, and for the most part, that area is primarily done, other than the landscaping may get advanced through the board to a PUD in September. So just a little update on that, if you happen to hear about that in your travels. Also up in this area, the SMOCs are expanding their architectural team to get a little more capacity, because I think their current architect might have been a little bit overwhelmed. So there's some changes that they're proposing to the product type up in here. When the ADRC and the original selection committee selected the SMOC team, they really liked the style of these twin homes. And so we've let them know that with the new architect coming in the door, this is still a really important style, because it was important to the selection committee, it was important to the ADRC. The SMOCs have heard that and have been responsive and are working through trying to keep that style. Those are the kind of just general project updates. At the workshop, the board had looked at these two configurations, the single-family configuration Phase 3, this more dense twin home configuration. The board said, gosh, we'd like to see somewhere in between. This is a very rough approximation of that, where we have twin homes here in the courtyard. There's a townhome there, and then there's single-family product in the rest of this. And this is the way the numbers shake out: 31 single-family, 35 twin homes, 8 townhomes, and decisions. Our favorite earthwork project, this is what it looked like maybe 2 weeks ago. And you can see it's has been challenging in a couple locations. We've run across gigantic bark seams, which we expected to do. It's slowly been getting filled in, and this is kind of what it looks like about 4 or 5 days ago. You can just barely see that there's a kind of still of a valley over here, and this is what that valley looked like. This is hard to kind of see what's happening here, but this is an enormous blob of concrete, and this is another enormous blob of concrete. Working with our geotechnical engineers in La Riviere, we worked through, this is actually under the future road. So we were able to leave this because it has to progress. And so the site is ready to receive structural soils from Atlas Road. That haul started today.